Number one, some of the problems that was generally associated with the incarceration of Mr. Allen that eventually led him to escape prison, and eventually his life and lifestyle while he was on the run, and again, the most recent parole hearing in reference to this particular case. Why don't you start off by giving us some information, Richard, in reference to Allen in the Tennessee prison system, and you might say something in reference to your own experiences in reference to that, Richard.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Haney. My name is Richard Simon, and I met Bill Allen we both were incarcerated at Ruben Maximum Security Prison. But before I speak on that, I had the pleasure to read his book before I met him. And the story intrigued me because way back when we heard a lot about injustice that went on and how black men per se were preyed on by the police. You hear stories like that, and actually meet someone who went through that, it was kind of interesting to me. And after meeting Bill and the stories I had heard about his case and about him, the two didn't meet. If you meet this person, here's a God-loving person who was brought up the right way, was in an adverse situation, and got himself in a lot of trouble. And as a result of the situation, 2 police officers lost their lives, which is a tragedy. But the silver lining in this is it didn't change Bill Allen. When I got in trouble, and I had the pleasure of meeting him when I got off death row in 1995, he was a guy I had read about, and I finally got a chance to meet him. I expected someone to be bitter because he had, it's been going on since 1968. And I met him in 1995 in the month of May. And he had a smile on his face, and he talked about a situation, but he didn't dwell on it. And so in meeting Bill, I was spending a lot of time talking to him, how do you do time? When you don't think you're getting out, how can you go through life just trying to be a positive influence on people in the environment? So in walking and talking to him, I got to know him from that aspect. And I couldn't put the two together because they would say that he ambushed police officers. And here's a man here, we call him Doc in the penitentiary, that he always would try to help people if you sprain an ankle and that kind of stuff. And so the two stories didn't match. So all I can personally speak on is Bill Allen as a person. Through adversity, he has brought a lot of light to a lot of people through the way he has went through his trial and tribulation. And I say that, it's like, I don't know how to say it in 10 words or less, but he didn't complain about his situation. You know, I don't know how he did when he was by himself, but whenever he talked to other people, and especially a young guy like myself, I'm about 15 years younger than he is, he'd always encourage me and tell me how I should be thankful that I got a break, and this, that, and other, that I got a life sentence, and maybe one day I'll make parole. He just done his time in a manner to which he was like day by day. And so this person, I'm thinking, oh man, how do I get where he's at? And over the years, you know, he just like rubbed off on me. You know, he didn't complain about his plight. And the more you learn about him, you wonder what makes him tick, because with all things considered, he got a bad deal in the courts. You know, he was charged with a double murder. They chose to try him 15 or 16 years after they tried him on the first case, even though he filed a motion for a fast and speedy trial soon after he got arrested. They chose not to try him. It was 5 years before he escaped with his incarceration. The courts had an opportunity to try him on both murders, but they didn't. So he didn't cry about that. He decided to take care of business himself, which I don't condone that, but he escaped. He was apprehended again. When he came back, he just, you know, he didn't dwell on the past, but we all look for the future in the penitentiary about trying to get out. And how he did his job and carried himself is almost unreal. How can a person be in the penitentiary with no chance, with no daylight, so to speak, and still go around helping people and teaching people, like a mentoring aspect? I know Mr. Floyd could take from there because he knew Bill before I did.
Yeah, good. Floyd, why don't you continue that in reference to Allen?
Okay, this should be interesting because I met Bill before he wrote the book and before the escape. I don't remember the exact specifics of how we met, but I do recall that I was told that there was a group of people meeting and writing and brothers talking about positive things, you know. And I met with them on the yard. They were sitting around in a circle talking, and I just sort of slid in and listened. And they were talking about books, black authors. They were talking about then Donnell Lee, Hakimata Buti now. And they were talking, somebody gave me a copy of Maya Angelou's I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. That's really the first time I had considered black people writing, you know. I like to write and so on and so forth, but our conversations dealt with things like Donnell Lee's book, From Planet to Planet. I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, you know. Black poetry, you know. That's what we talked about. And to meet Bill, I mean, you could put him in a room full of people, then on now, and have a conversation with all those people. And I'm positive you would never pick Bill out as the person that the news media played him to be, you know.
Okay, you know, Richard, let's look at the fact that Bill had been incarcerated for such a long time, but he also has had a parole hearing. Why don't you tell us something in reference to how that happened and what the situation is in reference to that?
Okay, earlier this year, Bill was blessed to get some redress in the courts, because when he got convicted on the first crime, they gave him a 99-year sentence. And some happened, some legal procedure was performed. They changed the 99-year sentence into a life sentence. And they backdated his parole date. Once he called me one day on the phone and told me that basically he should have went to parole board according to his paperwork 15 years ago. That they finally got a parole hearing. I said, okay then. And I asked him, was they going to parole you on both sentences? He said, no, it's custodial parole. I said, man, what, you know, that's not fair. He said, well, yeah, I got to get parole from the first one to the second one. I said, won't they give you credit for your time? He said, I hope so, but I don't know. So he went to parole board, and they gave him custodial parole from the first sentence on the first officer that they tried him on. I'm not familiar, I don't want to say the wrong name, but the first officer they tried him on, they gave him the life sentence for that. They paroled him to the second case. To my knowledge, they tried him for the white officer first and the African-American officer second. So that's what the situation he's in now. He's in a catch-22. Even though the court gave him some help, but they didn't backdate the help they gave him. They didn't apply it retroactively. So he's had been going through this since 1968. He's been back incarcerated since 1989. And the court said he should have went to parole board 15 years ago, but he just went to parole board this year. He just started a new life sentence after all this time. And, you know, and based on legal language, if he'd have been given a fast and speedy trial back when he got incarcerated, he'd have been tried on both cases, and he would have an opportunity, he would have served time to meet the parole board. I'm not saying grant parole, to go before the parole board within 30 years. You know, he wouldn't have to escape, but like I say, it's, you know, but as things are, it's all messed up because they paroled him into a new sentence from a crime that happened in 1968. They want him to start it, excuse me, in 2008.
And the way I understand it, this is the last individual, last principal involved in this case. Is that a true statement? That Bill is out of the two policemen and the defendants and all of these, Bill is the last surviving individual. Is that
The last surviving.
He's the last one incarcerated. I don't know if he's the last survivor. He's the only one incarcerated.
I think Bruce is still alive. Well, there.
But others that have participated in this, activity either have been incarcerated at an earlier period and are no longer with us. And Bill is really the last of the entire group. I
believe Alexander's alive, isn't he?
But he's not incarcerated.
He's not incarcerated. No.
So Bill is
Bill Ash is the only one incarcerated.
He's the only one incarcerated.
Because when it came down, it was quote unquote. When you read in the newspaper, it was a theory of an ambush.
Okay.
But as you read Al Browning's book, they say that 2 shots was fired and the officer went down, but in checking the police officer's gun, it was reported they got 4 shots off.
Okay.
So to say who shot first, Bill or the police officer, only God knows first.
And in other words, this group is in favor of some kind of justice in terms of perhaps getting Allen out of the penitentiary. Is that what we're saying? And of course, I say that because we are running out of time. And, and of course, we also have to encourage our audience to tune in again next week for another informative edition of Comments. Thank you and good morning.